Bonsoir. Si vous voulez, je vais vous parler comme je parle à mes amis, puisque vous êtes mes amis. Comme j'ai beaucoup d'imagination, je vous vois, je sais pas, il y a un monsieur, il y a une dame, il y a une petite fille, il y a une jeune fille, il y a un jeune garçon. Tout ça, ça fait partie de mes amis. Alors, je m'adresse à eux, puis je me confie un peu, je me livre un petit peu. Ça fait du bien de temps en temps de dire ce qu'on pense vraiment. Non, je ne regrette rien. Rien de tout ce qui s'est passé. Parce que ça m'a servi d'expérience pour tout, pour pouvoir exprimer, ressentir tous les sentiments, puisque je suis passée un peu partout, alors je sais ce que je dis. Et quand on est passé tout à fait à côté, enfin de la mort, disons ce mot, puisqu'il n'y en a pas d'autre, quand on est passé à côté, eh bien, on apprécie tout ce que l'on avait et qu'on n'a pas apprécié à l'époque. Et on souhaite qu'une chose, c'est de les avoir à nouveau pour pouvoir en profiter pleinement. Alors, écoutez-moi bien, quoi qu'il arrive, ne regrettez jamais rien. Ni le bien qu'on m'a fait, ni le mal, tout ça m'est bien égal.
C'est là où la légende est magnifique.
That's where the legend is so wonderful, and why she's such a unique character in the world of singing.
On choisit pas de
You don't just choose to cry out to the
Je ne
world,
regrette
I
rien,
regret nothing, and then disappear.
C'est Dieu ou
It's
le
either
hasard,
God
ça
or
dépend
fate,
des conditions
depending on your
que vous pouvez
convictions.
avoir les uns ou les autres.
But
Mais
it's
ça vous est donné.
given to you. It's not a
C'est pas un
choice.
choix. Donc elle n'a pas eu le choix. Elle n'a pas
She
dit,
didn't
je vais
have
mourir.
that choice. She didn't say,
Je chanterai plus une-
I'm
je
going to
chanterai- j'aurai une
die.
autre chanson
She didn't say
testamentaire.
she would have another testimonial song.
C'est comme ça.
That's the way it happened. It wasn't premeditated.
Ça se prémédite pas.
Edith Piaf est morte.
This time it wasn't a rumour. It wasn't a misguided report, as had happened before. On October the 14th, 1963, the police counted almost 400,000 people crowded onto the sidewalks between the Boulevard Lannes, where Piaf lived, and the Père Lachaise cemetery, where she would be buried.
People waited in line for hours and hours just to spend a second or two in front of her coffin. The whole of Paris was in the street. It was a national funeral.
The Boulevard Lannes was overrun. There were barricades, security people, and police officers everywhere. There was one entrance through the garden, and people managed to get in. The coffin had been put in what was the library, but it was good. People simply filed past the coffin, and there were a few people for whom I opened the lid so they could see Edith one last time. But there weren't many of them.
And so, before all the police officers deployed in an already dense crowd, the funeral cortege appeared, amidst a long line of cars belonging to her friends and loved ones.
The procession from the Boulevard Ornano to Père Lachaise was incredible. Louis Hamad, the prefect, was wonderful. He had stopped all the traffic. We set off from the Boulevard Lannes all the way to Père Lachaise without stopping once. Everything had been organized so that the police stopped the traffic. It was unbelievable. And there were people all along the way. It was quite something. When you went past, it was...
And the crowd fell silent again as the cortege walked towards the grave.
There were 4 cars covered with flowers, all manner of wreaths.
You had to fight for your place just because it wasn't enough to say, yes, I knew Edith. Everybody was saying that.
The following pictures may well shock you, as we were shocked this morning during the ceremony. I should repeat that there were 40,000 people in front of her door, and they all wanted to accompany Piaf on her final journey. The crowd was impatient, clumsy, almost disordered, bordering on indecency, and very quickly broke through the police cordons.
It was dreadful. There were people climbing over the tombs, and others who had climbed up into the trees to try and see, I don't know what, stars or whatever. But above all, it was the crowd's behavior. They came to bury one of their own. Piaf was a Parisian, and Paris paid homage to her.
Why did death come prematurely, at the age of 47? Had Piaf chosen to curtail her own life, burning the brief candle at both ends? Why not? Had she not written, "If I don't sing, I die"? To sing then, or to face destruction? It was an uncontrollable race against death, which began in September 1960. Piaf was ill, her days were numbered. Her doctor forbade any stage appearances and made the frank announcement, "If you don't stop, you will die." In Paris, Charles Dumont composed. He didn't like Piaf. She had humiliated him in public, calling him a minor songster. But even in decline, Piaf represented a certain commercial success. If she accepted a song, it would be a hit. At the time, Dumont was not yet part of Piaf's court, although he dreamed only of one thing, that his work could be sung by the legendary diva.
I called my friend Michel Vaucaire, Cora Vaucaire's husband. He'd already written a lot of very successful songs, and I said, "Michel, listen, I'd like you to come. I've got a song I want you to hear." At that time, there weren't all the technical facilities we have now, and you had to go somewhere to listen to a song. So he came, and I played him the song and said, "There it is. Would you like to write the lyrics for it?" And he said, "Yeah, I really like it." He went back home, and a few days later he called me and said, "I've found an idea for your song." As we'd put a very long note at the beginning, he says, "I've put no. I regret nothing, and I swear, by everything I hold dear, that I replied to Michel Vaucaire, 'Well, I don't think much of your idea. I don't think it's a very good idea at all.' But Michel goes even further. He tops it all then. He says, 'Don't worry. It's a very good title, and it's a song for Edith Piaf.' So then I say, 'Look, Michel, I beg you, whoever you want, whenever and wherever, I'll go to the end of the world if you want, but not Piaf. It's just not possible.'
And yet a meeting would take place, despite the fact that the Queen of Song postponed it several times. On October 5th, 1960, Piaf was feeling a little better and agreed to listen to the song she'd been hearing about for a number of weeks.
The door opens. It was a glass door opening into the living room. And she arrives in this blue dressing gown and pink slippers, taking tiny steps, and because she'd received treatment, which had caused her to lose a lot of her hair was very short. She totters over to the piano and says, "So, don't you want to play me a song?" She says this to Michel Vaucaire. She doesn't speak to me. So we go to the piano and I start playing. She says to me, "Play your thing," and I play my thing. So then she says nothing. She just listens. Then she says, "Why don't you play it once more?" And so I play it again, but more angrily this time, because by now it was really getting to be too much, much too much. And then it was quite extraordinary. First of all, she says something that really touched me. She says, "Is it really you that wrote that?" "Thank you, madam." I say, "Yes, it was really me." "Well, young man, you've written a song that will travel around the world."
Avec mes souvenirs, j'ai allumé le feu mes chagrins, mes plaisirs.
Je croyais pas trop.
I didn't really believe in it, when something good suddenly happens to you like that. And in a way, I was quite right to be a bit sad, because the next day I went to a publisher's and met one of my very talented and famous colleagues. He says, "You look pleased." I said, "I am. I'm very happy. Piaf has just taken one of my songs." "Unlucky for you," he says. "For once, Piaf takes a song from you, and now she's not going to sing anymore. Because they say she's lost her memory, she's lost her voice, and so she won't sing again."
Et je me demande si c'est pas au moment où on est le plus malheureux qu'on est le plus heureux. C'est par la souffrance que l'on donne de la valeur aux choses, non? Je crois qu'il faut payer de larmes un véritable bonheur.
She was incredibly courageous. She could barely walk, but she wanted to go round the garden all by herself. It was sad in the beginning, but then gradually... This was in Richebourg too. She was convalescing from her pancreatitis. She was all brown and green-colored. It was before she found the song Non, je ne regrette rien. It was just at that time. You can see the state she was in, and then 3 months later, she was at the Olympia. Not even 3 months. Yes, it must have been in October already then. And at the end of December, she opened at the Olympia.
Piaf wants to sing Charles Dumont's song. It is so like her. A woman born in a slum, brought up in a brothel. A woman who in turn experienced glory and degradation. In the autumn of 1960, her strength has abandoned her. She has not been offered a contract in over a year. But then comes an unexpected event. There is a rumor that the Olympia is bankrupt and the manager about to make the staff redundant.
At the end of October, the beginning of November, Bruno Cocatrix went to see her, begging, "You've got to help me. The Olympia's in big trouble. If you don't do it, I'm ruined." That type of thing. So she says, "Well, listen, you're in luck, because I've got this song I want to sing, and I'll go back to the Olympia with the song."
Edith Piaf, chaque fois qu'on vous voit réapparaître sur cet écran pour chanter, on a l'impression d'assister à un miracle qu'on n'attendait plus. D'où vous vient cette force, ce courage qui vous tire toujours des plus mauvais cas?
Je pense que c'est la foi en tout.
Vous croyez à la chance?
Je crois tout simplement.
À la destinée?
Non, je crois pas à la destinée, je crois que les bonnes choses arrivent si on le désire. Et je crois qu'on peut sortir de n'importe quelle mauvaise situation.
Dans votre vie, jamais vous ne vous êtes dit, lorsque vous étiez malade, par exemple, ou au lit, qu'il y avait des limites et que ces limites, vous les aviez franchies?
Bien, c'est-à-dire, quand on est malade, évidemment, c'est très dur d'avoir un bon moral. Mais tout de même, même si il m'est arrivé de me laisser abattre un petit peu, immédiatement, je reprenais le dessus en me disant non, c'est pas possible, je m'en sortirai, j'y arriverai.
Pour 5 colonnes à la une, et pour la première fois depuis un an, elle est remontée sur une scène. La chanson nouvelle qu'elle va chanter ce soir, c'est la chanson de son retour. C'est vous qui allez être son premier public.
She sang Je ne regrette rien, and the next day, the record shops sold out of every Piaf record they had in one day. They had the factories working at night to keep the shop supplied. At that time, they didn't sell as many records as today, but she must have sold 200,000 or 300,000 records in a month. It was a considerable amount for that time. If you sold 25,000, you were a star.
The opening night at the Olympia was fixed for the 29th of December 1960. There were just 9 weeks to prepare. A veritable challenge. Piaf went back to work with her insatiable hunger. Rehearsals were interminable, against the advice of her doctors and friends, sometimes continuing until 5 or 6 in the morning.
So she arrives at the Olympia, but she's certainly not in great shape. She's perked up and has been taking care of herself, She did have this extraordinary force within her, but it wasn't physical. It was a different kind of force.
Pas physique, une force venue d'ailleurs.
In the audience, there was Duke Ellington, Marlene Dietrich, Pierre Cardin, the whole of Parisian society. Everyone who had found a ticket or been invited. Paul Newman was there, and the audience was made up of the most famous American and French personalities.
She's looking at who the flowers are from, and then Michel Morgan arrives, and she kisses Michel Morgan.
It was a triumph that night. And I don't know, the audience must have applauded for half an hour. It was scary. Nobody left. The greatest stars, all there, on their feet, and nobody moved. She was exhausted, of course. We got her back after the 20th or 30th curtain call. I don't know. She was. And then back in the dressing room, there was a whole procession. What courage.
Quel courage.
Rien n'est grave au fond, tout recommence. Si ça va très mal, c'est obligé d'aller mieux. Quand ça va très mal, ça ne peut pas aller plus mal. Alors ça va mieux. Fatalement, il y a toujours de l'espoir quand tout va mal.
The contract was for 30 shows, but in view of their success, it was prolonged another 2 months. There would be 100 performances, and sometimes 2 shows the same evening. The Olympia's tills filled up again. People were fighting for Piaf's records. Edith, carried away by her success, would listen to no advice. She was soon exhausted once more.
The last weeks of the Olympia shows wore her out very seriously. You know, we'd go and get her. We'd take her from the dressing room, Bruno Cocatrix and myself, and we put our arms around her and take her to the stage. When she came off, she was dripping in sweat. She wasn't good at all. We'd be talking in the car. I'd say, "You've got to stop, you've got to." She didn't want to hear it. I'd tell her again, but she just wouldn't listen. There was nothing to be done. We couldn't stop her. She wanted to go on to the end.
What was to be done? She was basically only happy on stage. She made love with the audience. She was making love on stage. She was happy on stage, that's all. We saw her in a terrible state, terrible, worn out backstage. But as soon as she went on stage, something happened, and it was all right.
She went on right to the end. She went on in the last shows, the last week, say, it was like, will she be singing tonight? Will she be strong enough?
And when she went on stage, she found the strength?
She was put in front of the microphone. The curtain was raised, and she sang for 50 minutes. The curtain came down. We took her and went back to the dressing room. The last week was really very difficult.
Piaf saved the Olympia. Some would say it was suicide. And Bruno Cocatrix himself wrote her a letter. "My dear Edith, you have already performed one miracle by once more overcoming the evil spirits, but that you did for yourself. You have performed a second miracle by holding out for 2 months. I am ashamed. You have not only given me your talent, your genius, but above all a part of your will and determination, a part of your physical strength, in fact, a part of yourself." Contracts now pour in from all round, and Piaf refuses to rest and to stop singing. Yet again, she does as she wishes. Inebriated by success, she sets out on tour after tour, a performance frenzy that would slowly but surely kill her.
À vous voir ainsi chaque soir dans une ville différente, on a un peu l'impression que Peu importe la ville où vous chantez, mais ce qu'il faut pour vous, c'est que vous chantiez tous les soirs.
Ah oui.
Vous ne pourriez pas ne pas chanter?
Non, je peux pas.
Pourquoi?
Ah, c'est ma vie. C'est un exutoire, si vous voulez.
Oui.
J'ai besoin de ça. Je me retrouve. Il y a des gens qui ont des crises de larmes. Moi, c'est en chantant que je récupère.
Si vous étiez obligé d'arrêter de chanter, qu'est-ce qui se passerait?
Oh, je vais dire un mot très horrible, très horrible, mais je crois que je me suiciderais.
Il y avait de l'autodestruction dans...
There was an element of self-destruction in
Elle
it.
savait bien qu'elle
She knew fine that she wouldn't get very far. She knew fine.
Elle l'a toujours su.
She always knew that.
Et puis je pense pas
And I
qu'elle
don't think she wanted to get old, you know?
Vous savez, Brel, qui était
Jacques Brel, who was quite an extraordinary man, he wrote a song, Getting Old is Horrible.
Je suis sûr que
Do you
Brel
see?
aussi n'était pas...
I'm sure Brel, too, was the same. If he had lived a little longer, it would have been better for all those people like me who admired him, and all those people who loved him, and it was the same with Piaf.
Ces gens-là, ils devraient
Of
pas
course, we'd
mourir.
like them to live longer. People like that shouldn't
Comme ils
die.
savent qu'ils sont mortels, je pense qu'ils n'ont pas envie...
But they know they're mortal, and I think they don't want to become older and not be able to sing, and to do what? The fire in these people burns too bright for it just to become a glimmering ember.
Des petites braises, quoi.
Elle n'avait pas peur de la mort et...
She wasn't afraid of death.
Non, je crois qu'elle appréhendait.
No, I don't think that she was apprehensive about it, but
Elle n'aurait pas aimé vivre.
she wouldn't have liked to live as an old
Elle
woman.
disait qu'il fallait mériter sa mort, mais elle l'avait mérité.
No, she said that one had to deserve one's death, and she deserved hers. She had lived enough. She had lived 10 lives, not just one. And so that was fine.
J'espère qu'elle a trouvé le repos.
I hope she found some peace. She certainly deserved it. She had worked so hard.
And now, Edith Piaf. And just listen to the applause that greets her appearance on stage.
The press has already been watching Piaf for a long time, closely following her every move. Now each tour is a fascinating torment. Piaf spends months traveling the length and breadth of France. Crowds of fans hustle for tickets at every provincial concert hall, often so small she has to give 2 shows the same night. Everyone watches and waits for the fall, perhaps secretly hoping to see her final performance. If not tonight, perhaps tomorrow.
It is quite extraordinary as Edith Piaf, before her adoring public, is now totally transfigured. This is the great, the very great Edith Piaf we have before us, the enduring great tragedian of French song. As I was saying, Edith Piaf is very tired, as you can see. During her first song, she has just stopped. Someone has to bring her some water. She appears to have been taken ill, a dizzy spell, like in Maubeuge. But Edith Piaf immediately starts again. We have the impression Edith Piaf is dancing a lot. In any case, the audience is transfixed and will certainly give her triumphant ovation. This is Claude Talbot talking to you from the Cameo Cinema in Béthune.
This is on stage in Dreux, the famous tour that ended badly, the suicide tour, and she was drinking a glass of water. We were all horrified. You can see the expression on my face. We were all very worried. She was totally exhausted. She had nothing left, no strength left, and she was really ill. She went into hospital immediately afterwards.
It was in Dreux. Edith was very tired. She was advised not to go on her singing tour and to rest during the summer. She was holding on to the piano, barely standing up. She was very, very tired. But she went through with the tour, although it was very hard for her.
Yes, they were expecting to see her die on stage. The journalists were following her around. There were a lot of journalists. The rumors were going around that she was finished, that she was going to collapse on stage. And in fact, we had to bring the curtain down that day, and we got her off stage almost unconscious.
Ah, yes, the poor thing. You can see it in her face. The poor thing can't go on, but she insisted. She was adamant about singing.
She had so much willpower, so much strength of character. We tried to reason with her, to persuade her to stop, but she wanted to go on, as long as her strength lasted. She was unbelievable.
Elle était incroyable.
Il y a une autre sorte d'amour. L'amour qui vous sépare qu'on ne retrouvera jamais, c'est-à-dire quand l'être disparaît. Après la mort, ceux qui se sont aimés vraiment se retrouvent. C'est une certitude. Même si c'est qu'un petit point dans l'éternité, si on sait que ce petit point-là, c'est l'être qu'on a aimé. C'est la seule chose qui compte, je crois.
Il y a eu avant Marcel.
There was the before Marcel and after Marcel. Edith changed a lot after the mourning she went through after that terrible loss.
Il y a eu un choc terrible.
It was a terrible shock to her system, to her whole metabolism. And it was then that her pain started. She began to suffer terribly, and she couldn't handle the suffering at all. And on top of the mental anguish, there was the physical pain. And so that was just unbearable. She was given salts and things to calm her down, and cortisone and all kinds of stuff, but she suffered terribly.
A few months after the death of Marcel Cerdan, Piaf was afflicted by a terrible illness, polyarthritis. It twisted and racked her body, deforming her feet, her hands and face. To fight the pain and to keep singing, Edith stuffed herself with medicines, sometimes doubling or tripling the prescribed doses. The rumor traveled fast, and it was said that Piaf was taking drugs.
She could only sleep with the various products, the sedatives and soporifics or whatever. When that wasn't enough, the doctor would come and give her a shot of the same stuff when the pills weren't enough. So she managed to sleep, but the next morning, or rather the next afternoon, depending, if she had a recording to make, a record to make, she had to wake up. So then it was Maxiton. She took that too. So she needed to have a pretty strong heart.
On dit que vous ne dormez pas non plus, ou très peu.
Ah, ça. Non, j'étais... il m'est arrivé une chose stupide. J'étais intoxiquée par des barbituriques.
Oui.
Alors, enfin, en ce moment, je suis en train de les éliminer.
Oui.
Je ne le fais pas d'un seul coup. Et je pense que c'est ça qui a été la cause de certains troubles, si je puis dire. En tout cas, pas sur la scène.
Oui.
Mais pour voyager, dans la vie, quand je me réveille, une sorte de fatigue, un manque de mémoire, mais jamais sur la scène.
Combien vous avez bu de café déjà aujourd'hui?
Pas tellement, 2.
C'est peu pour vous?
Oui, pour me réveiller, oui.
Je la transporte à la clinique de Meudon pour une cure.
Here, I'm taking her to the clinic in Meudon for sleep therapy. It was the most emotional moment I've ever known in all the years I've spent with Edith. She's in a semi-coma, unconscious, and I'm trembling because I'm scared. She's as light as a feather, you could say. But I was frightened of dropping her. It was taken one summer morning in July. The journalists had spent the night in the Bois de Boulogne. They knew something was going to happen. But that was the most emotional thing in my life, carrying her like that, like a corpse, you know. There was a pharmacy, I remember. I think he was called Le Joigny, at the corner of her street. Anyway, not far from her house on the Avenue Henri Martin. I prefer to say that she was his best customer. She took enormous amounts of medication, but contrary to what people say, I never saw any drugs.
I never saw Edith with hypodermic needles. She didn't have any needles, nothing. She had no equipment like that. And anyway, she would never have done that. Certain books have said she used to shoot up through her dress, but no, never. Her mother, yes, but her, no.
During the last great show, the last great tour, doctor came to give her injections, yes, for sure, but it was medicinal. And it wasn't every day, it was just during her attacks. The times when it was either that or she couldn't work, and she'd suffer enormously.
And she didn't want to stop?
Oh, no. She said very, very often, I'd rather die than stop singing. That's definite, and I understand her.
We asked and begged the surgeon not to give her morphine just after she'd been operated on, but they were obliged to do that. And then all she could think of was getting over it. She wanted it to be over, and she did very well as it happens. She had a lot of willpower.
Not easy fighting such a dependency. From 1960 onwards, Edith kept notebooks filled with good resolutions. A few words scribbled down each night. No more injections. Hold on. Let yourself go when you're tired. There is no more passion that can hurt you, no more desire. But one evening's resolutions are easily forgotten the next morning. Piaf cannot live without her dose of pills, that instead of prolonging her life, only weaken her day after day. Her doctor wrote her a warning. Edith, stop taking the medicine, it's destroying your liver.
That's how she got a hole in her stomach. At that point, the slightest excess food-wise was very harmful. That's why she had hepatic comas, because all it took was one huge omelette, like she used to eat, and she had a good appetite. But as she was no longer allowed to do that, it made her want to even more, you know. When she did something daft, she went all the way.
Si votre médecin vous ordonnait d'arrêter et que vous sentiez que vous croyez avoir la force de continuer, vous désobéiriez à votre médecin?
Oui.
Vous l'avez déjà fait?
Oui, je fais que ça, désobéir.
Spécialement à votre médecin?
À tout le monde.
In 1962, Piaf met Théo Sarapo. She had hired him as a secretary, but then decided she would turn him into a singer. And then she fell in love with him. For her close friends, Piaf should never have seen this day. In October 1962, her hold on life was fragile. Crippled by arthritis, recovering from a liver operation, poisoned by pills, she was but a shadow of her former self. This unexpected wedding was therefore something of a resurrection, an event, a very curious event. He was 26, she was 46, and looked 20 years older than that.
Her whole life, she had had this ideal that resembled Théo Sarapo. She found it before dying. He had nothing that she had, and she had nothing that he had. And she had everything he could give her, and he had everything she could give him. It was a fantastic story. It was a classic encounter, and the public were quite aware of that. The public was never shocked to see Madame Edith Piaf, tired and exhausted, marrying some young Adonis.
In the mornings, you couldn't wake her up abruptly, so I would wake her gently. When I sensed that she was coming round, I would go and open the curtains, but I couldn't talk. If she wasn't talking, you couldn't say a word. So when she said good morning, how are you doing, and all that, well, and so I'm like, right, so you're getting married this morning? And she says, no, I'm not going, no, we'll have to cancel everything. I'll be ridiculous. What with the age difference, what will people think? No, I don't want to. So she didn't want to get married anymore. So after all the work I'd done, I said, we can't do that. And all the journalists have been told, and the Orthodox Church is ready. Everything was ready. Everything had been prepared, everything. The mayor of the 16th arrondissement. I'd been to see everyone. Everything was ready. But after a moment, she came round and decided, yes, obviously. And she realized that, in fact, it just wasn't possible to cancel it.
She had
a hard time writing, and it was very long for her. It was terrible. It took forever to write that name. Poor thing.
Cet amour est décidément très fort. Je crois que c'est le seul sentiment qui ne s'achète pas, qui ne se discute pas, qui ne s'analyse pas. Il est là, il existe, et il faut bien l'admettre.
If there hadn't been Théo, I don't think she would have stopped, but she would have let herself die even more quickly. I think he gave her a little boost, if you like. It gave Edith a boost. It wasn't the songs that did that. It was that fabulous story. The marriage. She got married. It was fantastic.
Un an et un jour après, elle est décédée.
1 year and 1 day later, she died.
C'est peut-être mieux ainsi.
Maybe it's better that way.
Why?
Bon, si elle avait vécu.
Well, if she'd lived on, affected like she was, with all the pain she had, and not being strong enough to sing, without what it took. And then at that time, the new pop singers were becoming fashionable. In order for her to continue being Edith Piaf, she would have needed all her strength and hard work. If she was diminished in some way, it wouldn't have worked. She would have ruined everything that had been so wonderful. So perhaps it was best that she left us at the height of her powers. Towards the end, unfortunately, there were a few concerts too many. It would have been better to stop before. Even her last show at the Bobino wasn't very good. It broke our hearts. We felt that something was wrong. This was Edith's attic, or rather the room that was going to be hers, which we did in 59 or 60 when we started on the building work here. We were hoping that she would be able to take advantage of it. Unfortunately, she just saw the plans and she saw the first photos, but she never got round to using it. We knew that she would need somewhere one day, because she had nothing left for herself. She had no country house, she had no other home. The Boulevard Lannes was rented. And for heaven's sake, in view of the state of her health, we were afraid she'd have to stop singing for a while at least. So between Loulou Barillet, who had a house near Bergerac, and us, she would always have found a welcoming home to go to. And we would have continued to live together, like we lived abroad, like a family. She would have been fine here.
July 1963. Piaf is ill again. Pneumonia, contracted during her last concert. She's recovering in Saint-Jean-Cap-Ferrat. A tour is planned for the autumn in the United States. She's pleased at the thought of singing again, and her appetite for life is returning.
She was fine. Well, when I say fine, I mean like someone convalescent. But she was raring to go again. She'd got this extraordinary voice back again because she'd been treated by doctors who gave her massages, like you do with children for bronchitis or whatever. She'd got it back. When she sang Ima l'amour, you could hear it. There was this big park, it was immense, and you could hear her from the road, from the main road. It was wonderful. We really believed it was possible. But then it suddenly got worse.
Edith drifted back into excess. Too many pills. Too many guests, too many parties, too much of everything, like an overdose. On certain evenings at Saint-Jean-Cap-Ferrat, There were 145 dinner guests. Too much bad advice. Come on, Edith, come and sit at our table.
Elle a fait une rechute par des excès de
She had a relapse because of overindulging with food, things she shouldn't have eaten but which she ate anyway.
Il y avait tellement d'invités.
There were so many guests, it was impossible to watch her, and we couldn't say anything.
C'était elle la maîtresse.
She was the boss.
Alors, son infirmière,
her nurse was furious and got very angry with her. And I wasn't happy at all, but ultimately, what can you do? We couldn't forbid her, she was the boss. And so, unfortunately, she had another liver failure, into a coma, and she went back into the clinic at La Boca in Cannes.
Piaf was in a coma. The American tour was cancelled. The visitors thinned out, as did the money, draining away rapidly. In early August 1963, Danielle, the impresario Louis Barrier, and Théo Sarapo left Saint-Jean-Cap-Ferrat for a more isolated house in the hills above Grasse, taking Edith with them.
She wasn't even reading anymore. She couldn't face reading. She was vegetating a bit during those last days. She was thinking. She was lost in her thoughts. We didn't bother her, we left her to think and reflect. But there was no way that we thought things would deteriorate to that extent. And then I remember we brought in a healer.
Un guérisseur dont on nous avait parlé.
A healer somebody had told us about. The nurse decided that the healer should come. He put his hands on her and all that. But of course it had no effect. She listened to records by Brel and other oldies, I don't know, the clock ticking in the living room. I don't remember, but it was sad. But then the last record I put on for her was her own record, the concert at Carnegie Hall. And she listened to it all the way, without any comment, saying nothing. We listened to it quite calmly. And then she said, it was the last sentence she spoke to me as it happens. She said, "We've still got some good journeys to make, my dear." No doubt she was hoping that. She still hoped she could set off again on tour.
I wrote a song with Jacques Brel for her. But in trying to go to see her, she didn't want to see me. But she was too ill. So I was a bit disappointed. I sang the song to her over the telephone, or rather I hummed the song over the telephone. Then I went away, and when I came back, she was dead. She told me I'll be back in Paris in October. And she came back dead.
The last day, in fact, since the day before, she'd been in bed and not at all well. But nothing out of the ordinary. Then in the morning, we really sensed that it was serious. The nurse was in a bit of a panic and asked me to do what I could to find a remedy. So we could give her a drip in case she got dehydrated. She gave her this perfusion, but it didn't do anything. It didn't stop anything. I immediately made a telephone call to Loulou, obviously, in Paris, so that he could inform Théo, who was on tour. I told him it's bad, it's very bad. She was clearly on the point of leaving us. So Loulou told me, I'll tell Théo, don't worry, we're on our way, we're coming. We'll be there this afternoon. But he was expecting to find her still alive, I suppose. And then it must have been about 1:45, I don't know the exact time, but round about then. And we saw that it was over. That was it. She went away. I went in to see her. I could tell it was the end. But it was just a last breath. She didn't make any movements from the pain, nothing like that. She just went as if she were sleeping, if you like.
Théo Sarapo, Louis Barrier and Danielle then made a strange decision, not to make any announcement, to keep quiet about Edith's death, just for a few hours, until they could secretly take her body back to Paris. On October 10th, 1963, discreetly, almost clandestinely, Edith left the south of France.
I was at La Boca, seeing the nuns who had treated Edith before, and I told them what had happened. She's dead, but we don't want people to know yet. We have to get her back to Paris. I managed to get an ambulance. The nuns were very, very helpful. They said, "Don't be afraid, we'll send some trustworthy people who won't say anything." So we got Edith ready, and the ambulance arrived about 8 o'clock, and we set off for Paris.
An illegal journey across France. They even went so far as to give Edith a fake drip.
There was the nurse and Théo in the ambulance. If the ambulance had been stopped along the way, we would have said that she had just died, in transit. She had to die in Paris. For her, it wasn't possible any other way. That was what she wanted, and very strongly.
Edith's doctor was woken up during the night. He agreed to sign a false death certificate. Officially, Piaf was pronounced dead at 8 a.m. on October 11th, 1963.
In Paris, we had to receive everyone. Tino Rossi talked to me for a long time in the living room. All her friends were coming, and they wanted to see her again. There were some we could let into the bedroom, and others that we didn't let in. And then there were the embalmers, and she was embalmed. The embalmers that came were 2 Americans. Théo put makeup on her and combed her hair like he always did. She looked lovely. She had a dress on, a stage dress.
October 11th, 1963 would remain etched in people's memories, as no sooner had Edith Piaf's death been announced than that of Jean Cocteau was made known too. A strange coincidence. 2 friends, Piaf and Cocteau, who had so admired one another. The poet had even written for Piaf a play, Le Bel Indifférent. And legend has it that it was on hearing of Piaf's death that Cocteau collapsed.
He was very ill, there's no doubt, and he might have died, but perhaps not that day. But I've heard that a journalist telephoned him saying, "You know that Edith Piaf is dead." And that was a terrible blow to him, obviously, like when you love someone very much, and they tell you just like that they're dead.
Edith and Jean. What could the street singer and the man of letters have in common, apart from the love of beauty and of perfection, if not perhaps suffering and illness? During their last years, they exchanged letters frequently. Cocteau loved Edith very deeply. In one letter he wrote, "When you sing, it is as if you are tearing your soul apart for the last time." That is how Piaf lived, as if each day of her life were her last. And that is how she sang, the plaint of a whole lifetime, an epitaph.
These are people who, in the time that is given to them, live 10 times more than other people. 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. They were 1,000 times more generous, 1,000 times more angry, 1,000 times happier, 1,000 times more triumphant, 1,000 times more unhappy, all at the same time. So when they die at 45 or 50 years old, they've had a full life.
Et je ne regrette rien pour 1000 raisons, parce que maintenant, je me dis que tout sert à quelque chose, qu'il y a une raison et qu'il faut passer par où l'on passe pour faire quelque chose d'important. Enfin, ce que j'estime, moi, d'important dans ma vie.
Non, rien de rien. Non, je ne regrette rien. Ni le bien qu'on m'a fait, ni le mal, tout ça m'est bien égal. Non, rien de rien. Non, je ne regrette rien, car ma vie